Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to our webinar related to the quality of digitization in mass digitization projects. I would like to take the opportunity to invite you to next week's webinar with Martina Hoffmann from the Swiss National Library. Unfortunately, on Monday we had a scheduled meeting, but it had to be cancelled due to some technical glitches. So next Wednesday, December the 15th at 5 p.m., Martina Hoffmann will join us again, and she will talk about designing mass digitization projects. Today, Andrzej Daniluk from the Polish National Library will tell you about quality assurance in digitization projects. When you are making a lot of scans or a lot of photographs. The Center of Competence in the Polish National Library is extremely happy to be able to start another series of educational meetings related to what we do here as part of digitalizing our library depositories, but not only. Join us.
Good afternoon, I'm Andrzej Daniluk. It's a pleasure. Thank you, Tomasz, for having me. Let me also thank the Ministry of Culture and National Heritage for making this workshop available and make it possible. Thanks to them, we can share our experience with you. I'm a photographer. I deal with digitizing the most valuable items in the National Library in Warsaw. I also deal with quality assurance, quality control, and color parameters, color management, and the quality. This is what we do in our everyday work. Well, let me make a reference to Don Williams' speech and also to the speech by Martina Hoffmann, which will take place next week. So in this context, I would like to discuss the technical aspects as mentioned by Don Williams, and I would like to show you how this applies to a big digitization project. The project was Patrimonium 1, which is already over, and now the project Patrimonium 2 is the project we are now working on. So what's the purpose of digitization? Why do we digitize? Well, digitization is about creating the most perfect reproduction possible. What does it mean? Well, from today's perspective, it's about the best digital reproduction with the highest amount of data possible. And this is what we should focus on generating files, because the outcome of digitization are files. We create such files according to the highest quality standards, according to the methodology approved and adopted. Why do we do it? What's the purpose of digitization, the reason behind it? Well, actually, there are three main reasons. First of all, to make it available, to share it, because there are some antique books you would never be able to access in the National Library. But thanks to digitization, they are available on the website and everyone can have a look or use them in their work, be it creative work or any other types of work. This is available on the Polona website. Secondly, we also digitize for the purpose of keeping records, for the purpose of documentation. If we are digitizing a photo, a sheet of paper, a book, and if we are digitizing 3D items, let's say museum exhibits, in both cases, we try to document the condition of the item in the most precise way possible. Thirdly, this is done for the purpose of archiving. And this is done specifically by the National Archive. So they digitalize to archive, but also to share it and to document it. So we do three things. We share, we archive, and we document.
Do tych wszystkich kwestii technologicznych, z którymi bardzo ściśle związana jest digitalizacja, bo jest to
So how can you approach all these technical aspects related to digitization in a huge digitization project? First of all, the most important thing is to analyze resources. So you need to address the question, what is it you want to digitize, how many items you have, and what type of items they are. Because the answer to this question will determine what you're going to do. Once you know that, you can start thinking about the choice of the proper equipment, meaning scanners or cameras, or maybe some other specific devices to be used in the process. But first of all, you have to know what you're going to use to digitize your resources. You also have to define the technical and quality requirements for the digital copies. This is also a very broad topic. It's also related to the terms of reference, because you will have to draft the terms of reference and the specification, because you have to buy the equipment. So the more specific the requirements to be met by the devices, the more likely you are to get the equipment you really want. So the technical and quality requirements related to the scans or the copies you're going to make is also related to choosing the right digitization approach or methodology. So based on the approach you choose, you should also draft a digitization guidebook or manual, which describes the parameters to be met by the digital photos of your exhibits. You have to also decide what quality control tools you are going to use to measure the quality of the reproductions. So the tools you're going to use, you will also have to buy them, and you should use them. Thirdly, it's very important to perform quality control. The two Patrimonium projects in the National Library had a stable level of quality, while I'm speaking about the reproduction quality, despite the fact that we generated millions of files, and this is exclusively thanks to the quality control procedures we implemented. This is because whether you apply Metamorphose or Fudgy, both methodologies advise you to, well, they have different guidelines depending on the type of materials and the quality expectations, etc. So depending on what type of materials you've got, based on that you have to decide what equipment you will use, what the quality will be, what methodology you will use, whether you will go for Fudgy or Metamorphose. Because, well, both methodologies, each of them has a bit different, slightly different parameters when it comes to color reproduction. In Fudgy you have Delta E2000, in Metamorphose you have Delta E1976. So the color quality is measured in a different way here, and because of that you have to go for one methodology or another. So you choose the methodology, and then the best thing you can do is to write your own digitization guidelines, meaning a set of procedures about what you will do and what quality you want to achieve, a kind of a white paper for you. Of course, it's advisable to rely on a chosen methodology because it makes things much easier. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. And also, if the digitization guidelines are compatible with a methodology, it means you are following the global standard. Soon there will be another global standard arriving. You've probably heard about the fact that the digitization methodologies have included the ISO standards, and soon the checkers will have to be replaced, the software will have to be replaced, but this is still yet to come. Also, at the beginning, you have to decide on the measurement equipment, the measurement devices. Again, it depends on what equipment you're going to buy and what products you're going to digitize. It also follows from the methodology you have chosen, namely whether you will be using Metamorphose or Fudgy. This will also determine what checkers you will use. You have the standard checkers, the 24 color checkers, which can be used in both methodologies, and they can be considered a usual everyday checkers, which allow you to measure the quality of color reproduction. And also, the last thing you should take into consideration is the quality control procedures. Namely, you have to decide on how you will measure the quality, what will be the parameters you want to meet, what will be the time lapse when you measure the periods between which you measure the quality. So this is also something you need to think about and prepare beforehand. Now the tools to produce digital copies of physical artifacts. In practice, in a cultural institution, in general, there are two types of equipment in use. First of all, you have scanners. Their type depends on the type of products to be scanned. So therefore, it's very important to perform the analysis of the resources. And depending on the size and type of the products and the artifacts, you will choose large format scanners, for instance, A1, A0. In Patrimonium 1, we used many scanners of this type because we had to scan a lot of posters and large-scale artifacts and exhibits. And also, if we have many books and bound items, stitched items, the V scanners are the best option. Why? Well, if you open a book to digitize, the angle of opening is up to 110 degrees. So if you cannot fully open the book because it's an old book, you can digitize it well without any risk of damaging the book. We have a few dozen V scanners here in this library. There are some scanners especially designed to scan old books, which you have to be very careful when dealing with. They are V scanners with a very specific parameters of pressure, not to damage the book. So we've used these scanners successfully as well. We have few of them, but I know that the National Archive and other museums have many transparent materials, diapositives and negatives. And you can also use scanners for that, but as it turns out, you can also use a digital camera. Well, I'm anticipating this topic because it turns out that nowadays it's the most universal tool for digitization. Don't forget that the majority of scanners produced nowadays actually are cameras, digital cameras, because the scanning technology now has been moving away from linear matrix, because this is very problematic. The shift is irregular, the quality of color is much worse. So the operation is not smooth, etc., etc. So the trend in general nowadays is well, the following, namely a silicon matrix is the most popular solution, as CMOS is the most used technology today. Well, when it comes to the number of pixels in a matrix, well, I think that in 2022 there will already be matrices available with over 20 million pixels, 200 million pixels, which will also allow us to obtain an even larger resolution.
So we are waiting for new technologies, for new matrices, because every new generation brings about another generation of scanners which produce even better quality than before. So in the library, like I said, we are using flat scanners for smaller objects, larger format scanners for bigger objects. We are also using quite a lot of V-type scanners in our practice, and with our collection they work the best, they are fast, they are durable, and so on and so forth. We have over 30 scanning stations, and apart from that we also have 5 stations to digitalize using digital cameras. The current practice is that all the valuable, beautiful things which should be especially protected because of their historic value are digitalized in our library using digital cameras, because we do not use any glass panes to flatten the object, which is really appreciated by the conservation teams. And this is sometimes one of the reasons why we are allowed to digitize an object, because we are not pressing any glass against it. And we are using equipment in our digitization stations which allow us to obtain the best quality of digital copies. Actually, with the cameras, we are meeting the requirements of FADGI 4 stars in terms of color quality and in terms of the resolution of the image of the SFR. Of course, it requires some control and measurement tools. We use the checkers that you all are familiar with. They might have 24 boxes, as the one here. They tell you only about the color quality. Or if we work with digital cameras, we are using the golden thread system. At the very beginning, we have chosen FADGI as our reference point, and our digitalization manual tells you what object to digitalize and how, and it's based on the FADGI methodology. So we are using those X-rays for color quality checks with the scanners, and in terms of digital cameras, we are using this type of checkers because apart from telling you the parameters about color quality, they will also allow you to check the parameters related to the spatial frequency. In other terms, that also tells you about the resolution of the copy that you have just made. Speaking of digital cameras, in our digitization context, we should think about the camera as one element of our digitization station, because the digital camera itself, it's just a device that will record an image. And in order to record that image, you will have to fix that camera on a tripod, for example. Also, you will have to illuminate the object with an appropriate light source, which will be best in terms of photography, optics, and physics. So it has to be optimum from our point of view and from the perspective of the digital camera. Of course, you need a workstation, a table where you will work. Those workstations often have some illuminators that will allow you to digitize also transparent materials with a digital camera. Of course, you need enough capacity in your hardware, in your computer. The files from the largest digital camera that we use in the National Library are up to 450 megabytes. So imagine photographing a book that is 500 pages long. A lot of data, fast disks, capable processors. These are the computers that you will need. Of course, in order to ensure quality and in order to provide optimum parameter setting in your digitization station, you will also need tools such as software and color checkers. I have already shown you the color checkers. They will depending on the type of your station and on the precision that you want to achieve. Either you will check only the color quality, or you will also need to check the resolution and contrast. Software-wise, some models of the checkers have their dedicated software, but being an institution of culture, we have decided to use a free service, which is a very popular tool, simple, free of charge, readily accessible from a website, so you don't need to install anything. You just access that website, upload a file. It will calculate delta E for you, so you will know what the color quality is. So this is the basic measurement tool that we have used in Patrimonium 1 and that we are now using as part of Patrimonium 2, and it really works. Of course, if you want to use this software, you will need the right type of color checkers. Apart from this day-to-day quality control validation of the results of our validation, we will also use software which is dedicated to those color checkers. I can recommend to you Digitize, which is free of charge. At least in one of the versions, you can use it for free. We are also using ESR software, which is dedicated to this type of color checkers, to the golden thread. So, dear colleagues, we have two methodologies. We've got FADGI, the American one, based on the perception model, or speaking of color quality, and we have Metamorphose from Netherlands based on a mathematical model. Both of those methodologies describe the parameters related to color quality, to resolution, and so on and so forth, but they also suggest how to select the quality parameters depending on the type of the object being digitized. Of course, the documentation for both methodologies is available online. You can download the PDF files, read through them, and understand what it's all about. So, coming back to resource analysis, for various object sizes and various object types, you might use various sets of parameters that describe quality and various parameters that will describe the spatial functions, so the resolution and contrast. But also the methodologies inform you what resolutions can be used to reproduce various types of objects, what should be the values of certain parameters, and so on. Fuzzy has been designed to give you 1, 2, 3, or 4 stars, depending on the quality that you have achieved. 4 stars is the best quality that you can achieve. It's like a general, so there is nothing better than it. So if your copy meets the Fuzzy 4-star standard, it's a very good quality. 3 stars is good, 2 stars satisfactory, 1 star is not something that you would be interested in. In the National Library, we are interested in obtaining results of at least 3 stars, preferably 4. This is what we pursue, and this is what we are able to achieve here. Metamorphose methodology has 3 levels of quality, and they are described like this: metamorphosed extra light, metamorphosed light, and let's say the full metamorphose. So the full metamorphose is the top quality, light is the good quality level, and extra light is a mediocre, or let's say acceptable quality level. Following resource analysis and following your selection of methodology that you are going to use, it is also a good idea to get familiarized with the description of the quality requirements for various types of objects. As I said before, it's good to write your own digitization manual, which will be based on your reality, on the characteristics of your project or of your collection. Of course, it's best to write a digitization manual for a given institution, including the specificity of your institution, rather than starting writing a new digitization manual for every individual project. It's also good to give it a second look, because it's going to be your white page, your path that you are going to take when you digitize your collection. I have one more slide here. It's about creating your own digitization manuals. On the right, you can see the requirements concerning the photocopies and photographs. This is done according to the Fuzzy methodology. And on the left, you can see an initial digitization manual. And you can see a fragment with the recommended parameters, with the parameters that are going to describe the quality of your digital copies. Here, I have just one remark: the dynamic range for digital cameras, it says 12 here in terms of the aperture, but today it's better to have 14 to 16 bits per matrix. Of course, 16 bits describes the amount of information that describes your image. The more information we get, the better for us. Because the bottom line is that we want to get a digital copy being the best possible copy of your physical object, and it means that it will have to be described with the most amount of reliable data. So we are trying not to lose data on the way as we go through the digitization process. If we take a photo using a digital camera, we will have to use the RAW, the raw file, which is the raw data from the matrix. Then we will process the photograph. We will subject it to mathematical operations to produce a TIFF file, which is our preservation image to be stored in our repository. So this is what it looks like. This is how it works in general. And let's now look at the most important parameters that we measure using our methodologies. Oh, there is one more important thing. Coming back to the beginning, coming back to our resource analysis. We also need to consider that if we know what kind of material, what amount of material we have, we will select our devices, our hardware that we will use to digitize our material. And already at this stage, we need to think that we need to write a specification for tender, describe the terms of our tender. So we need to have a very detailed description of the equipment that we want to have, because then we have the public procurement law and so on. The more we know about the devices, the more parameters we put into the specifications, the better chance we get that the equipment we receive will be the one we wanted and will meet our expectations, that it will ensure appropriate quality in our digitization project. So this resource analysis actually tells you everything, also in the technical area. It is really crucial to do it properly, because the data from this stage keeps coming back to you at every step of the project. So what do we measure? We measure the following parameters. We measure color quality. So what's the quality of the colors in your copy? We use mainly the checkers, the X-ray checkers with 24 boxes. Depending on your scanning preferences, you can use the mini color checkers or the classical color checkers, which are more or less in A4 format. And those checkers have only colored fields, so they will only allow you to measure the parameters, informing you about the color quality. This is our magical delta E, either 2000 or 1976. And since we have accepted FADGI in the National Library as our reference point, we are using delta E 2000.
So every person who's scanning needs to have such a checker next to their device. They wear down, so you have to replace them every 2 years at least. And also, if you don't handle it properly, then you can stain the colors with your fingers, which means that the checker over time becomes useless, so you have to handle them with care. So 24 field X-rays, this is what you use to read the parameters for the quality of color reproduction, namely the delta E. Also on the website, delta.ae. This is where you can also find some other parameters related to SR, FR, MTF. They describe the whole, the other aspects of the quality of the image, the focus, the contrast, etc. And also the resolution. Because according to the FADGI approach in the National Library here, every photocopy which are smaller than A5 need to have at least 600 pp resolution. This is what we're trying to stick to. So delta E allows us to identify the resolution very precisely. We have the sampling efficiency parameter as well in delta E, and it tells you about the quality of sampling. On one hand, it's difficult, but it's also simple. It's a percent value. So the perfect quality of sampling is 100%. And the sampling efficiency is also a percent value. So now we know how far from perfect a picture is. 4 stars in the fudgy approach means that sampling efficiency is over 90%. So in the spatial functions, in all these digital operations, you can lose up to 10% of quality. So not bad. The sampling quality follows from the MTF functions, the spatial functions that describe the contrast. This is what they actually describe. Of course, these are functions, this is all maths. You don't have to know a lot about it, especially since these values are given in pixels, sometimes per millimeter, so you have to convert them. It can be confusing. So if you're just a common everyday user, sampling efficiency is the parameter which will be much easier for you. You know that you need 90% of quality, so not bad. Now, another parameter which is important to us, which is obtained from delta E, mainly the maximum amplitude of SFR. SFR is actually pretty much similar to MTF. So what does this mean, this maximum amplitude? If it's larger than 1, the file is highly likely to have been refocused artificially. This is distorting the image, and we want a accurate, a truthful reproduction. So this is something you need to remember. So the maximum amplitude actually shouldn't be larger than 1. If it's larger by a centimal point, this is not bad, but if it's larger by 2 decimals, this means that the image has been too tweaked digitally. Now you also have the illumination, the light, mainly whether it's distributed equally, the light. This allows you to read the values of the RGB channels, and if the difference is larger than 1%, this won't give you 4 stars. You need delta E smaller than 3 if you want 4 stars, and sampling efficiency you need to have it higher than 90%. And illumination, the quality, the distribution of illumination needs to be under 1%. So this is well, the parameters you need to meet to get 4 stars. And with this checker, you can read all the parameters you need. Unfortunately, with this one, you can only read the color parameters. So you can check whether the colors are right, but you don't know what happens with the focus and the other parameters. But these checkers allow you to measure all these parameters. Also, importantly, the noise, the digital noise, is something I'd like to mention, because scanners are built and calibrated to in a way to minimize the noise. The noise appears when the matrix is working with a larger sensitivity. You also have to measure the noise. There is a cap you cannot exceed. In digital cameras, you have to meet the basic matrix value, which is usually 100 ISO, because this is what guarantees the best result, the lowest noise possible.
Teraz, szanowni państwo, może przejdziemy.
Ladies and gentlemen, let's move on now to delta E. I'll try to explain
Mierzona jest ta
how
jakość odwzorowania kolorów.
the color reproduction quality is
Każdy
measured.
ze wzorników, który posiada pola barwne,
Every checker with color fields
opisują wartości każdego z tych
is described, namely each value is described
Czyli wiemy, że to brązowe
by the
pole ma
manufacturer. So we know that this brown
przestrzeni kolorów, wiemy jak
field has some specific values, and so do the other fields.
balans bieli,
You can balance the whites on the gray fields. You can also check the exposition on some of the fields because the reference values are described, so no problem with that.
wzornik położymy na skanerze,
So what happens if you scan such a checker or make a digital photo, and if you later on upload it to Delta E?
referencyjne wartości,
The manufacturer gives the reference values, the software
które zarejestrowaliśmy, liczy
reads the values and calculates the difference.
E2000 i tak samo delta E70.
Delta E 2019-76 is basically the difference between the checker and the actual values measured. And the smaller the difference, clearly, the better the value.
Delta E jest niższa.
So the lower the delta E value.
Tak jak mówię, 4 gwiazdki.
So as I've said, 4 stars means delta E below 3.
Jeszcze o takiej rzeczy, że mówimy o takim
And let's not forget that this is actually the mean delta E. This is the proper name. The mean delta from all the 24 fields. Sometimes the mean value is under 3, but if you look at specific values of specific fields, it turns out that the values are 5 or 6, but on average it's under 3 because it's balanced, it's compensated by other fields. So you have to bear that in mind, because if you don't, you might forget that some colors can be different than we wanted to. That can be actually far from the delta under 3 parameter.
Za pomocą pipetek czy próbników
Actually, if you use samples and the software you're using, you can scan this checker, you can read the values of the fields and compare it manually with the reference values as given by the producer, the manufacturer. Here you can see the general definition of delta E. I had to show you the formula, and next to it you have the chart with the values of sRGB and lab. Lab is the general, the basic way of describing digital colors, and it's also then converted into the RGB without any problems. In lab, we have some differences in the illumination and the colors, so the L channel and the A and B channels. So you have these 24 field checkers to measure the delta E, namely the color quality. Now some more advanced issues, namely the spatial functions. So here you use other checkers. Here you have an example.
Przy pomocy naszego rzeczywiście najlepszego aparatu,
A checker photographed by a matrix of 150 million pixels, our best camera. To the right you have the color analysis. 30 fields on this checker You can see that the delta E2000 is 2, so 4 stars without any problem. At the bottom left, you can see the spatial function values. So the resolution is 605 ppi. According to Fudgy, it's 4 stars. Because there is 1%, a 1% difference. If 600 is the target value, the difference is 5, so no problem that. 97% of the target value, and we are only 3% worse than the perfect setup. Well, MTF 50 and 10. Well, we don't have to dwell on that because sampling efficiency describes it. The SFR amplitude is 1, so no over-enhancing. Then we have the difference in colors 2.
Także jak Państwo widzicie, żeby nie być gołosłownym, to jest próba normalnie zapewnienia.
0.02 pixels, so this is a good result. So as far as I remember, this was a very nice antique book, and we always try to digitize such items with the best parameters possible. So this is an example of how we use digital cameras. Well, a digital camera requires using this type of checkers. So you have to measure the resolution, the SFR function, because if you are using a digital camera, this is a completely mobile setup. A scanner is a fixed, closed structure. It's a structure where the lens and the matrix are fixed, they don't move, the light is always the same, no changes here. The working conditions are the same, so you can only calibrate the scanner once, as long as you're not going to move it to another room, etc. But if you are using a camera, well, it's a bit different. Because if you choose any parameter, you have to recalibrate the workplace. You have to recalibrate to reset the optimum parameters to develop RAF to TIFF. So you need these checkers to define the resolution and other important parameters. So a digital camera always involves this kind of stuff because this means that it's a dynamic situation. So a digital camera requires more experienced staff to deal with it. It requires more experience than scanners.
With all due respect to your scanning staff, of course, they need to know how to handle the original copies, how to measure the baselink parameters that are used to control the quality of their work, but they don't need as much experience and as much knowledge as photographers, who also need to know some physics, some optics that's applicable to them. And they will also need to know how to interpret the measurement results using the color checkers, how to set the camera and all the other hardware in the digitizing station to get the best possible quality of your digital copies. Speaking of scanners, in our Patrimonium project, we have adopted the following procedure. Every day, the scanning staff, when they come to work, when they start up the scanner, they will wait for 15 to 20 minutes. We found that this is the time it takes for the LEDs to warm up. If you want your LEDs to emit the optimum light spectrum, they will need to warm up. And the same applies to flash lamps that are used in museums or in libraries. Also, the flash needs to flash several times in order to get the right temperature, and so that every subsequent flash is the same in terms of light intensity and in terms of color temperature. So, coming back to scanners. In our scanning department, every person, after the scanner has been warmed up, will take the 24-box X-Rite color checker, and they will need to check what are the baseline parameters of the day for their scanner. If the parameters are within the predefined range, so they are below, for delta E 2000 below 3, then the scanning staff can start working because we know that their device meets our requirements. It doesn't require any recalibration or additional inspections. Everything is okay. As you can see on the slide, we do it in accordance with the file naming protocol. This is a file from the 8th of December 2021. It's scan number 19. This is a V-type scanner. And as you can see, delta E is about 1.6, 1.7, so it's shockingly high, we might say, but we are able to achieve that delta E with our scanners and to stay with within that range. 2.5 is our maximum. It's also important to have a difference between those two in our delta E, because we cannot reproduce only one part in terms of colors. We have to keep it in balance. So apart from keeping delta E as low as possible, we are also trying to keep the values equal on both sides of the scanner from both cameras, because this is what guarantees repeatable quality. This also tells us that every page of the digitalized book will be the same, will look the same at least. So this is our day-to-day practice at the National Library. In terms of digital cameras, our practice is that we have color checkers, and we tend to use those that also tell you about other parameters rather than the colors only. You can use, let's say, the hybrid type checkers with colors and the spatial parameters too. We can also use a regular X-Rite, and we can also use this RQ62 checker, which is used to verify contrast and the details. So we can use this plus QA62. You don't have to buy golden thread. If you have X-Rite and QA62, you can measure the same parameters as with that checker. So now I would like to tell you how to achieve success in a mass digitization project. How to achieve success in terms of quality, how to implement all those requirements, how to stay within all those technological requirements that Don Williams was telling us about if you have to digitize 1 million objects, for example. Well, it turns out that one of the most important things, apart from your resource analysis, buying the right hardware, writing a correct digitization manual, defining your measurement and quality assurance procedures, then after you have done all this, you have a good chance of achieving success. But the procedures have to be followed. So your scanning staff actually have to come to work, warm up the scanner, use the color checker first. This is important because it provides you a daily validation of your output. Also, your scanners and your digital camera stations require a constant illumination. So you cannot, for example, have uncovered windows and have no sunshine in the afternoon and a lot of sunshine in the morning. Because if you do your calibration in the morning, it just does not compare to your calibration results in the afternoon. So keep your windows covered, keep your illumination, keep your ambient light at the same level, at a constant level, because this is the light that you use to calibrate your scanner. Of course, the ambient light will also be picked up by the scanner and it might impact your output. With digital cameras, it's even more important because your photography studio should be completely isolated to avoid any external light from penetrating inside. Of course, you also need some appropriate neutral paint on the wall, which doesn't reflect light, which doesn't cause any additional effects. So, following the procedures, that's one. Daily control of your samples, that's two. This is an element of the procedure. Your scanning staff or your photographer, before they start digitizing the first object of the day, they will have to verify whether that device is capable of producing top quality digital copies. What's also important, if you think about quality assurance in some large-scale projects, is how you select your devices. So based on your resource analysis, based on your knowledge about the technology that is used in digitization projects, you have to choose the best devices possible that will produce the best output, the best quality digital copies. Apart from that, we should also make sure that during the project our devices are maintained and calibrated regularly. We have come to the stage that every day we verify whether our scanners meet the requirements, so we don't have to calibrate them more often than once a month, maybe even less frequently than that, because if the parameters are measured and they stay within the recommended range, we are happy with that and we do not have to recalibrate. Of course, you have to maintain your scanners properly. They have the mechanical elements, so they need to be lubricated, they need to be cleaned. That's important, especially in case of projects where you do hundreds of millions of scans. So maintenance, you don't want any downtime in your devices. You want to keep them running. So also it's good to take into consideration the quality and durability of your equipment and the availability of the servicing technicians. And last but not least, properly qualified staff. Even if you had the best devices in the world, if your staff who will work with those devices don't know how to use them properly, or if they do not have enough theoretical or practical knowledge to produce good scans, you won't get good scans at the end of the day. So your staff, your scanning employees should know how it works, they should know how to handle the objects, and your photographers who should have much more theoretical knowledge than the scanning staff. They should know how digital photography works, they should know physics, they should know optics, because this kind of knowledge will allow them to manage those day-to-day problems. Why is my image red? Why is my image so dark? Why is it out of focus? And so on and so forth. So scanning staff and photographers should be properly qualified. Once you have satisfied all those requirements, as we did in our library as part of the Patrimonium project, Well, we had 5 years to work with large-scale digitization projects, so we had some time to learn that. So we know that our procedures are followed, that our quality is assured every day in accordance with our procedures. We keep our illumination constant. We don't want the sun to impact our scanning or our photographs. We regularly maintain our devices. We have properly qualified staff to use those devices. They just know what they are doing. I'm sorry, but we are very proud of what we have achieved in the National Library. So I think we are doing quite well. We have scanned over 1 million objects as part of Patrimonium 1. That was about 200 million scans. As part of Patrimonium 2, we are also going to scan hundreds of thousands of antique books, some handwritten materials, which are really demanding in terms of methodology. They're also very demanding in terms of quality parameters. Let's digitize everything. I hope you're going to have some successful projects and you're going to get 4 stars in your quality assessment. Thank you very much. Well, about those 4-star quality, let me just remind you that 2 days ago somebody asked Don Williams whether we should implement a 5th star, a new level of quality. Well, he just laughed at it and he said that 4 is enough, 4 is enough trouble to get, so no need for 5 stars. Well, it is an issue, it is a challenge that we were able to achieve because we were working as part of a huge project, because we are a competence center in terms of digitizing library repositories. So one of our tasks is to assist you and to address your questions. So now we have one more challenge, because a minute ago when I was looking at the chat box, I didn't see any questions, but I'm going to put my glasses on in a second to look at the chat box again. Anyway, I would like, Andrzej, to give you a task of saying, what would you have done if you didn't have such a well-financed project as Patrimonium? So imagine you work for a smaller institution and you're facing a challenge. With a limited budget, you would like to properly digitize your collection. What would you do? Of course, being a center of competence and being proud of our achievements, I would still tell you that we are ready to share our experience. We are ready to share what we have learned over the last 5 years. So if you work as part of a smaller project, not a mass scanning project with millions of scans or photographs, well, definitely your budget will be smaller. So you will have to look for less expensive solutions, for more value for money solutions. But unfortunately, the general principle also applies to what we do. So the better things are, the more expensive they get. So you need to answer the following question. What digitization quality is sufficient for you? What do you want to achieve? And what quality do you want to manage?
Also, the analysis of the resources will give you an answer to this question, because this is really a big thing, because this analysis will probably address most doubts or questions you might come up with along your way in the project. So if you're happy with 3 stars, just buy equipment that will give you 3 stars, because certainly that's cheaper than 4 stars equipment. But on the other hand, just answer the question, what is the purpose of digitization? Because you don't want to re-digitize over again in a few years, only to improve the digitization quality. So if you want to save money, you actually want top quality and top equipment because you want to do it for many years in the future for people in Poland and globally, for your children and grandchildren. So actually, you should opt for the best equipment available. Of course, you have to strike a balance. It's always a trade-off. You need to find the best trade-off between the quality and the price. Also, if I may, there is another issue. If you are trying to obtain funds from the ministry programs, please do read the requirements very well. The requirements of handing the objects to handing it over to the national repository. This is, for instance, the project of the the Ministry of Culture. On the website of the ministry, it is written what the National Library recommends to institutions that want to digitize their archives in a quality that is good enough. If the best possible requirements cannot be applied. So first of all, rely on existing standards. Unfortunately, in Poland, the digitization standards are not very well defined. So whether we are speaking about museums or national archives or libraries, these are three separate fields, and each field has its own requirements and approach. We also have an approach we have to take, and this will tell us what kind of equipment we should buy. The technology is evolving so fast that today if you have a standard digital camera 24x36, for the price of this, you can buy a medium format camera for the same price, which will give you better parameters because of the matrix and better optics because of the matrix it contains. This will give you better quality, and the price is almost the same as a small scale camera, which will give you small photos. So the progress is really huge, so you have to keep up with the market, because actually a lot can change completely over 2 years. Should we use drum scanners? And why not? Why so? We have never used them here, I think. First of all, because it's a very old-fashioned technology. The drum scanners are actually a semi-analog technology still. There is no maintenance service, Citex, etc. I don't think this equipment is still in use. I doubt it, because the quality was high, but the handling is slow. You have to stick the materials to the drums, etc. And also the conservators in the library probably would kill us if they realized that we have to stick the negative to the drum. We have some transparencies here, we have some negatives. We don't have a dedicated scanner because we don't have a lot of them. The National Archive, the National Digital digital archive, as we know, they have a lot of photos and they scan and share a lot of photos. So it's the basic option for them. Unfortunately, the best scanners with the virtual drums are also already an outdated technology. They are out of production for a few years now, and in a few years the technology will be scrapped completely. We have made tests and we have realized that with a medium format digital camera you can actually achieve a similar quality. So today this is the only reasonable option. So if you have huge resources, huge collections of negatives or slides, you don't have a Hasselblad Macon scanner, as long as I can use the brand name. Anyway, you will have to buy a new scanner, which is not available on the market so far, or you will have to build a new workplace relying on a digital camera with at least 100 million medium format. It works fine. So let me greet the National Digital Archive here. Me too, but also let me give you another question. Let me ask you another question. I will use a product name. We use the Phase 1 camera with 150 megapixels. And the lenses we use, are they specifically developed for the model? Are these the lenses we're using? Well, at this moment, no. We have the lenses, but given the size of the matrix and the number of pixels, Phase 1 is the best device we have in the library, 150 million pixels. So we can digitize large formats, maps included, although it's very troublesome. And it's very high quality, very high resolution, also graphics and photos, etc. We also use Fuji, 100 million pixels, the matrix, very good optics, and for smaller formats, it's really good. It really works very well. So if you don't need 150 millions, if you don't want to Phase 1, and if you don't want to spend about 40,000 euros, you can easily buy a smaller matrix. Fuji, they are cheaper and the effect is just as good. The result is just as good. Last week we performed tests and Fuji 100 million pixels, medium format. It's very good when it comes to scanning negatives. One more question about the 80 millimeters lenses. We have AirCam. This is a device in the library. You put the 150 million matrix on it, and this gives you. This is where we have two state-of-the-art lenses dedicated to this matrix. But actually this device is quite old, it's not very automatic, so it's difficult to handle, it's time-consuming. Therefore, as this is a mass digitization project, we prefer to use a usual and ordinary body Phase 1 and ordinary lenses. We know how it works. We have made very precise measurements. We know what aperture we should use to receive the best focus possible in the whole field of the image. So this is enough. Best wishes from NAC. From NAC. A question to me now, thanks. Apart from the Ministry of Culture's program and the standards they implement, apart from this, do do you organize training sessions for institutions? Well, it's a difficult question because there's the pandemic. It's been with us for a year and a half now, and the library has been undergoing some huge restoration works for 2 years and a half now. This means that this is a bit of a stalemate for us.
Szkolenia, w czasie których uczestnicy byliby na terenie biblioteki, zostały zawieszone.
There is no training now with people present in the library. There is some online training. Well, it is possible to organize online training, but I think that next year, which will happen soon, in 23 days actually, next year we'll probably organize this form of training, because this is necessary both for you and it's also necessary for us. Because actually it's much better to speak when both parties of a project speak the same language. So please expect on our website, please expect news about it soon. Of course, also you can send an email to us, centrum.kompetencji@bnorg.pl. I'll post it in the chat soon. So this is how you can get in touch with us. And of course, you can also email us directly the first letter of our name, surname, and @bn and so forth. And we will be happy to share our experience with you, and also as the Center of Competence, we are required by law to share our expertise with you. So please contact us. We want to improve the quality and the digitization procedures in Poland. This is a very young field. We actually might say that it's 10 years old, so the whole world is in the process of learning, so are we. We have already made hundreds of millions of scans, and we have dealt with many problems already. So we are more than happy to share our experience with you.
Nie ma nowych pytań, także ja w tej chwili
no more questions.
Będę nieobecny duchem, będę wpisywał adres mailowy.
So I will now type the email address and the website address in chat. And Andrzej, please tell us a few more words about the future. Will there still be digital cameras that require highly skilled employees, or maybe AI? I hope not, but AI works. And an anecdote now. I've looked up the latest generations of digital cameras in smartphones, and the process is striking, but not always in terms of quality for us, because the pictures are much more beautiful, but they are not exactly accurate from our point of view, or truthful, faithful. Ladies and gentlemen, so as I've mentioned, the scanner technology relies on matrices that are sensitive to light, similar to digital cameras. Well, it turns out actually that this technology is heading in a different direction from what we need. The technology, the whole industry heads for machine vision, AI, shape recognition, movement recognition, picture analysis.
So what we have at our disposal in the area of digitization, these are just sideways of the technology that we can implement in our field. So the general tendency is to go away from scanners with linear matrices due to a lot of technical issues that they produce, and also because they achieve much lower quality than the modern flat matrix devices. Today, the maximum size of matrix available on the market is 150 million pixels. It's a Sony matrix, and it can be used together with a Phase 1 150. The number of pixels is limited, so if you want to digitize a large object like A1, A0 with 400 to 600 BPI, then the matrix won't have enough pixels, it won't read enough information. Anyway, you can believe me that in 2022 there probably will be devices available over 200 million pixels, which will allow you to work with A1 or A0 at 600 BPI. So this is the general direction the technology is heading. Also, we are headed towards more precise measurements, towards more precise definition of the parameters that are relevant to us. There is also the ISO standard for the digitization area. I think introducing the ISO standard is going to be a big project for us here at the National Library, or maybe our kids will do it, but yes, we'll see who will do it, but that's going to be definitely the next major step in the digitization technologies. Oh yeah, and one more thing. Today, if you look at the technologies related to digital imaging, to the processing of digital images, you can see that definitely the manufacturers are not so much focused on the quality of the hardware, I mean the optical systems, but they are much more interested in equalizing the imperfections related to some optical drawbacks using software. So in general, in photography, we have a trend called algorithm-based photography. So that's what they use in iPhones. No matter what matrix you have, AI will make your photos look beautiful. Unfortunately, in our area, we also have it to some extent. So you get some less resolution, for example, in your scanning, but you can compensate for that using the software. Well, there are some limits to this digital game, because you have to remember one thing. Every digital intervention to our file will cause the information to degrade. Every operation will reduce the amount of information that you have recorded in your file. So our image will have an inferior description with data. So the manufacturers, the technologies are trying to find the golden standards between software and hardware. But believe me, having the right lens to work with a 150 million pixel matrix is really difficult and extremely expensive, because you need properly seasoned glass, you need appropriate machines that will grind the lens into the right shape very precisely. Of course, you have R&D works. All this makes such device much more expensive. And since the manufacturers want to be more competitive in the market, they try to balance the quality of optics with software. This is the standard for today. One more simple question. is the standard color checker with 24 boxes, which was designed for photography. Does it also work with scanners? Yes, it does work with scanners. We do not have any issues with that checker. It's actually a very good one. No matter if you are a photographer or if you are scanning, you should use this one because this is today's standard. Almost every software that can read Delta E 2000 or Delta E 76 can read this checker, either the bigger one or the smaller one with 24 colors. So you can just put it on the scanner, and it's the same principle for scanning and photography. Actually, a scanner is two digital cameras built into a frame and set so that they can photograph two pages at the same time. So actually, it's a digital camera. Are there any more uses? If you have a digitization station based on a digital camera, you can use those checkers for color profiles, so for a mathematical description of your illumination conditions. And you can do this color profile if you are going to photograph. No matter if you are photographing books or other flat objects, or if you are photographing 3D objects, as it is the case in museums in general, we will use the same checker for making the color profile. So the results of your measurements and the whole digitization workflow will be better if you use the same checker for profiling and for checking the quality of your colors. You have the same reference point. So you should not multiply profiles using some different checkers unless you really have to. A good practice, which will also impact the quality in your large-scale projects, will be having the same profile and the same checker used for your daily checks. X-Rate is quite inexpensive. It's 350 PLN. So as compared to this type of checker, which is several times more expensive, X-Rate is really a good value for money. It's a good tool for you. If you have an old-timer in photography, did you mean me personally? No, I'm just talking theoretically about an old-timer photographer. So we have color checkers, we have software, but if you cannot have this, or if you don't want to have this for some reason, what can you do? Well, from the digitization perspective, which is a very broad term, we are talking about digitization in the context of what we do, transferring digital copies of physical objects into our repository. So we can work with flat objects like books, or we can work with 3D objects like they do in the museums. But no matter how you work, you need to have some standards. You need to use some checkers. Happy or not, you will need to use color checkers, and you will need to use software that will read the parameters for you and that will analyze them for you. The cost is really not that high. The checkers are 350 PLN, as I said, and the Delta E service is free of charge. So you will have to do all the color management, all the quality assurance, but all you need to do is buy this color checker, enter the Delta E website, create your profile free of charge, and you can read all the parameters that I was referring to on my slides. Actually, today, you cannot think of any digitization project without a measurement tool. You also need to spend some of your budget for those tools anyway. Okay, so one more question to our audience. Was that clear for you? Are you going to be able to explain what we discussed here to the decision makers in your organizations? Don Williams also was talking about that we are buying equipment, for example, for $100,000 or 100,000 zloty in Poland, but we don't buy the checkers that would amount to 1 or 2% of the total value of your hardware. But without those checkers, without quality assurance based on the use of those checkers, your equipment could be just placed in your storage and be just dusted from time to time by the cleaning staff. Well, ladies and gentlemen, the bottom line is you are buying a Porsche, but you are not buying new tires to drive in winter. I want to say that if you are buying expensive equipment which is very precise and which are not produced in large numbers, it's not 1 million pieces a year like in the motor industry, but it's several dozens a year. Of course, with digital cameras, the production volumes are higher, but if you are buying a device for 100,000 PLN, then you have to buy some extra tools for 1 or 2,000 in order to be able to measure the quality of your digital copies, because that's what your process is based on. So, speaking of methodology, if you buy tools but you fail to control the quality of your output, then you are making a very basic mistake. As simple as that. It's a methodological mistake. Well, there is one more area which is related to digitization. Well, there might be more of them, but there is one that I have touched upon during today's presentation, and I think it will have to be addressed. This is the selection of your hardware, of your equipment, and describing the specifications. It's about a certain attitude. Your attitude should be as follows. You have a digitization project and you want to ensure as high quality as possible. You are doing that also for the future generations. You want to get all those expensive toys, so to say, to ensure a very high quality of your digital copies. If you buy a cheaper scanner today because of budget restrictions, in 4 or 5 years, the digital copies that you have made will fail to meet the new standards, because the standards might be revised in 2 or 3 years. Everything is moving forward. So let's try to buy the equipment that you know works well, that's high quality, that's durable. You can say top-of-the-range equipment, because you probably have a good guess of what equipment will work for you and what will not. Well, speaking from our experience working for 5 years on patrimonium projects, we have learned quite a lot, and we'll be happy to share our knowledge with you. Okay, let me now interrupt for a second, if I may. Actually, thanks to all that has been discussed by Andrzej today, we will be able to obtain files. I'm not sure how to precisely describe the feeling that I've got inside of me, but that's just the beginning of your journey, the beginning of this, let's say, awful project, because getting a good input to your project is just the beginning. You have to have good descriptions for your files, otherwise you won't be able to know what's inside. You have to be really persistent to follow the procedures. Also, look at our requirements for sending digital files to our National Library repository. We also defined the formats of the files in there. Yes, because if you think of the technologies that allow you to obtain the image, I have not referred to the files, but apart from the hardware that you will need, you will also consider what you will do with your output, because your output will be files. So we will need some appropriate IT infrastructure to handle those heavy graphical files. You will need really truckloads of servers, but that should come up in your resource analysis. Yes, this is what we have at the National Library. If you prepare good files as part of your digitization project, we promise to store them long-term in our infrastructure, and the Ministry of Culture and National Heritage will finance that. We also have this Chronicle project, and this project should become some additional way to secure the files for institutions in Poland. Yes, you have to consider the IT infrastructure, but also you need to think about metadata, because this is metadata standards, IIIF, and all the other things. So we have a lot of terms in library that we use. Yeah, but anyway, your methodology is really important, because those are the methods that we use to describe the files, and they are standardized. You will need to pick one of those standards. We want your files to be interoperable. You want to know what happens with them in 2 or 5 years. They might be available in London, in Moscow, in New York, or somewhere else. Maybe we'll have some additional servers in some other cities.
So the choice of metadata is also very important. So at the beginning, after the analysis, you already know how many workplaces you need. You will also define the technical requirements, but also this is when you should also think about the metadata description standards, naming standards. Otherwise, it might be complicate things to you, or it turns out that you won't be compatible with the National Library, and the National Library will not accept your data, and it will be difficult for you to get the approval for the project, and you might be at risk of having to return the funds. So also, when you are preparing a project, you need to describe the standards, you need to describe the purpose, where you will store the data, how the data will be managed, etc. So metadata is something you should be aware of from the very beginning of the project, when you are starting to draft the project. So before, you need to analyze the resources, you need to think about the technical aspects, also the human labor required, whether you have enough room, which room with proper conditions, because this also has an impact on the equipment, because sometimes someone wins a tender, the equipment comes, it turns out that the equipment is too high and won't fit into the room it's supposed to be kept in, or the width of the door. It turns out that the door is not 80 centimeters wide, it's a narrow door, and the scanner cannot pass through the door. So the only option is to take out the window and lift it through the window, or make a hole in the wall.
Trochę dłuższym czasie naświetlania.
And also, sometimes there are vibrations in the room, and this leads to some distortion of the image. So there are many variables you need to take into account from the very beginning. So analyzing the resources and drafting the project, these are the most important stages. These are the very early stages, but the most important one. Because you might decide to ask for 1 million more because you might need better equipment. And if you substantiate it, if you justify it properly, you might receive the funds. There is money for us, so let's make use of it in a sensible way. And also analyze your resources to learn what kind of equipment you will use. And also you have to study the market very well and learn about the technology, because there are many manufacturers, there are many types of equipment. The quality outcomes vary. And also some reliability standards vary, so better to know about it in advance, and also it's better to wait for 3-4 months and apply for funds a bit later and wait till a new generation of equipment is released, because you will know that it's a new generation, a state-of-the-art technology. As there are no questions in chat,
chwilę przerwy chyba, taką bardzo krótką, i nie będzie to chwila milczenia.
I think I'm going to break for a moment, a very short break.
Te 1,5 godziny, które spędziłem na słuchaniu
And in the meantime, let me tell you that this an hour and a half with Andrzej has been very inspiring to me, and also the question we have received about training is a very important one, and certainly soon we will organize some training, and of course we are trying to obtain funds for that. But once the restoration works in the library are over, once it can be used in a safely way, especially the educational room, and as long as you're vaccinated, sorry, I have to say that, I think that next year we will be happy to invite you for training here to the library, National Library. And in the meantime, please attend our online meetings. There is the pandemic, we can do nothing about it, and as Tomasz has mentioned, for the time being we don't have rooms to take you in, because we cannot have 20 people in our digitization room, that there is not enough space there. So we, as the Center for Competence, for the time being, we have no rooms, no space to offer training in some proper conditions. And also there is the pandemic and the construction works. So let's wait. Once this is all over, we will certainly be willing to organize on-site training, in-person training, to share experiences with you, because this is the most valuable thing, where you can learn how it all works and where the mistakes come from. So far it's virtual, but once it's all over, please come and visit us in the library, National Library, and also visit us not now, because of the pandemic you're not allowed to, but after the pandemic, please come and visit. We will show you the scanners, we will demonstrate how they work, and we will tell you how to design the digitization process, also from the point of view of the supply of materials, storage, document flow and management, etc. And you can see our workshop, our rooms, our workplaces. Once again, I've posted the address in chat, where you will find the link, namely the video from this meeting, and also the video from the meeting with Don Williams and the meeting with which will be held this Wednesday at 5 p.m. This meeting couldn't have been held on Monday. Martina Hoffmann from the Swiss National Library. She will discuss how to get ready, how to get prepared for a mass digitization project. And I really recommend this meeting. It will be available in English, a foreign language, to Martina and to me, but at the same time it will be translated, interpreted simultaneously into Polish. So under this address, you can see in the chat now, I hope, you will find the link to the video and to the meeting in the on the National Library's website. You can find it under the current events tabs. Well, unfortunately, Don hasn't been able to visit us because of the pandemic. But I think that in general we have done things quite smoothly, because Don has started by speaking with many advanced and complicated things. Today I've tried to bring a more practical approach to it, and Martina in next week will discuss it from the point of view of the project approach, how to run a project, including the quality parameters and the technical parameters, understood in a more broadened sense than the quality parameters as we understand them. So she will give you a general picture of the digitization projects, and more about digitization to follow next year.